Welcome back. It's time for 3 more creepy tales about dating. Let's begin with The Vanishing Date. I met Sarah on a popular dating app. Her profile was charming, filled with photos of her adventures and a captivating smile. We hit it off immediately and decided to meet in person after a week of chatting. We chose a quaint little cafe downtown for our first date. When she arrived, she was even more stunning in person. We talked for hours, losing track of time. As we left the cafe, I offered to walk her to her car. She hesitated, but eventually agreed. We reached a parking lot, but there was no car in sight. She looked confused, saying she must have parked in another lot. I offered to help her find it, and we spent the next half hour searching to no avail. Finally, she insisted I go home, and she would call a friend for help. Reluctantly, I agreed. The next day, I texted Sarah to check if she was okay, but there was no response. I tried calling, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Concerned, I decided to visit the cafe again, hoping to find some clue about what happened. The staff remembered us, but had no information about her. Days turned into weeks with no word from Sarah. I reported her disappearance to the police, but without any solid leads, they couldn't do much. Her profile on the dating app vanished, and it was as if she never existed. The memory of her haunted me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened. One evening, I received a cryptic message from an unknown number. "Meet me where we first met." My heart raced as I recognized the reference. I went back to the cafe, anxiously scanning the area. A man approached me, claiming to be Sarah's brother. He handed me a small, worn journal, saying it belonged to her. The journal was filled with disturbing entries about someone following her and strange occurrences in her apartment. She wrote about feeling watched and finding things moved around. The last entry mentioned her going on a date with me, and fearing it might be her last chance to find help. Determined to uncover the truth, I contacted a private investigator. We combed through Sarah's journal, trying to piece together her final days. The investigator discovered that several other women had gone missing under similar circumstances, all linked to the same dating app. We tracked down an address mentioned in the journal, an abandoned apartment building on the outskirts of town. The investigator and I decided to visit the place, hoping to find some answers. As we explored the dark, eerie building, we stumbled upon a hidden room in the basement. The hidden room was filled with photographs and personal belongings of missing women, including Sarah's. It was clear that someone had been stalking and abducting them. We took pictures of the evidence and contacted the police, who arrived shortly after. The police investigation led to the arrest of a man who lived nearby. He had a history of mental illness and a disturbing obsession with the women he targeted. Sarah's body was never found, but the discovery brought some closure to her family and the other victims' families. I often think about Sarah and the other women, wondering what might have happened if we had never met. The memory of her captivating smile and our first date at the cafe haunts me, a reminder of the dangers lurking in the most unexpected places. I shared my story with others, hoping to raise awareness and prevent similar tragedies. The Vanishing Date became a cautionary tale, a dark reminder that sometimes the people we meet online are not who they seem. Story 2. The Stalker X. I reconnected with an old high school friend, Emily, through social media. We had always had a good rapport, and after a few weeks of chatting, we decided to meet up. Our first date was a nostalgic trip down memory lane, and we quickly rekindled our friendship, which soon blossomed into something more. Emily mentioned she had recently broken up with her ex, Mark, but assured me it was a clean break. We spent the next few weeks getting closer, and everything seemed perfect. One night, after a lovely dinner date, I dropped her off at her apartment. As I drove away, I noticed a car parked across the street, its driver watching me intently. Over the next few days, I started noticing strange things. My car tires were slashed, and I received anonymous threatening messages. Emily admitted that Mark had been obsessive and controlling during their relationship, and she feared he might be behind these incidents. We decided to go to the police, but without concrete evidence, there wasn't much they could do. We tried to continue our relationship, but the fear of Mark's presence loomed over us. We took precautions, like changing our routines and avoiding being alone, but the sense of being watched never left us. One evening, as I was leaving Emily's apartment, I saw Mark waiting outside. He confronted me, accusing me of stealing Emily from him and threatening to make my life miserable. I stood my ground and told him to leave us alone, but his eyes were filled with rage. Later that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that Mark was following me. I drove around aimlessly, trying to lose him, but his car was always in my rearview mirror. I finally managed to lose him and went home, but the encounter left me shaken and fearful for Emily's safety. The harassment escalated. Emily received threatening calls, and someone broke into her apartment, leaving it in disarray. We knew it was Mark, but he always had an alibi. The police advised us to get a restraining order, but Mark seemed to always be one step ahead. Emily decided to stay with me for a while, hoping the distance would deter Mark. We were constantly on edge, every knock on the door and every unknown number on our phones making our hearts race. The stress took a toll on our relationship, but we tried to stay strong for each other. One night we heard a noise outside my house. I grabbed a baseball bat and went to investigate, finding Mark trying to break in. A scuffle ensued, and I managed to subdue him until the police arrived. Mark was arrested and charged with stalking and harassment, but the ordeal left us both traumatized. We took legal action and got a restraining order, and Mark was eventually sentenced to prison. The sense of relief was immense, but the scars of the experience remained. Emily and I decided to move to a new city, hoping to leave the past behind and start anew. Moving to a new city gave us a fresh start. We got Mark off our minds and put the experience behind us. We became advocates for victims of stalking and harassment, sharing our story to raise awareness and help others. The Stalker X became a tale of survival and resilience, a reminder that love can overcome even the darkest of times. Story 3. The Creepy Roommate. I met Alex through a mutual friend, and we hit it off immediately. We started dating, and everything seemed perfect. Alex was kind, attentive, and we shared many interests. After a few months, he suggested I move in with him to save on rent and spend more time together. I was hesitant, but eventually agreed. His apartment was spacious and well kept, but there was one room he told me never to enter. He said it belonged to his old roommate, who had moved out suddenly and left all his stuff behind. Alex claimed he was waiting for the roommate to come back for his things, so he kept the room locked. A few weeks after moving in, I started hearing strange noises coming from the locked room at night. It sounded like shuffling and whispering. I asked Alex about it, and he brushed it off, saying it was probably the pipes or the building settling. But the noises persisted, growing louder and more disturbing. One night, while Alex was working late, I decided to investigate. I found a spare key hidden in his desk and unlocked the door. The room was filled with old, dusty furniture and personal items that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. As I was about to leave, I noticed a diary on the nightstand. I couldn't resist reading the diary. It belonged to Alex's old roommate, and the entries were increasingly disturbing. The roommate wrote about Alex becoming more controlling and paranoid, eventually locking him in the room and refusing to let him leave. The final entry was a desperate plea for help. Terrified, I put the diary back and locked the door. I decided to confront Alex about it, but I needed to be careful. That night, I barely slept, haunted by the thought that I might be living with a dangerous person. The next day, I tried to act normal but couldn't hide my fear. Alex noticed and asked what was wrong. I lied, saying I was just stressed from work. That evening, I confronted him, showing him the diary and demanding an explanation. Alex's face twisted with anger, and he accused me of snooping and betraying his trust. He tried to take the diary from me, but I refused. He then revealed a darker side I had never seen before, threatening me and saying that no one would believe me if I tried to leave. The realization that I was trapped with a potentially dangerous man sent chills down my spine. That night, while Alex slept, I packed a bag and quietly left the apartment. I stayed with a friend and contacted the police, sharing the diary and my experience. They launched an investigation and discovered that Alex's old roommate had been reported missing, but was never found. Alex was arrested, and the truth about his dark past came to light. He had a history of abusive behavior and had been involved in several other disturbing incidents. The police found evidence that he had been stalking and controlling his previous partners, including his missing roommate. The experience left me traumatized, but I was determined to move on and rebuild my life. Gradually, I started to feel safe again. I shared my story publicly, hoping to warn others about the dangers of abusive relationships and controlling partners. The creepy roommate became a cautionary tale, a reminder to trust your instincts and always be cautious when moving in with someone. I still think about the old roommate and wonder if it was his tortured soul that led me to the diary. The memory of Alex's twisted face haunts me, but I am grateful to have escaped with my life.